Welcome to the Making Nice with Naughty podcast, where we delve into the art of intimacy for the rule-following, organized, perfectionist, practical, and color within the line types. I'm your co-host, Dr. Tom Murray, a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified sex therapist, and the author of the book that started it all.
Hi, I'm Dr. Frances Robbins, a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. My background includes a master's degrees in nursing and international health, along with a doctorate in business administration. We're here to explore the world of intimacy in a way that resonates with even the most structured and detail-oriented individuals.
In Making Nice with Naughty, we uncover the secrets to navigating intimacy for those who thrive on rules, order, and perfectionism.
Join us as we discuss practical insights, expert advice, and personal stories that will guide you through the journey of connecting intimately while staying true to your organized and rule-following nature.
Whether you color within the lines or prefer a perfectly outlined plan for everything, we've got you covered.
So buckle up and get ready to explore the fascinating world of intimacy. With us, Making Nice with Naughty is not just a podcast. It's your guide to a fulfilling and organized love life.
This is Making Nice with Naughty. Let's dive in. Hi, Frances.
Hey, Tom.
It's always such a delight to be with you.
Oh, thank you. And likewise, I'm excited to be here today. We have a lot of very, very fun stuff to go over today.
Oh, I think so. This is a real exciting chapter.
Yes, and I just have to say, kind of give a shout out. I heard from a reader who has had your book. Their mental health provider actually suggested that they read your book, and they are convinced that many of the scenarios are them. So great job on just kind of tapping into the over-controlled and really giving them, or this particular reader, some real take home, and they could see themselves in those scenarios. So thank you for that, and it was great to say, yeah, I know the author.
Well, thank you for passing that along, and certainly if any of our listeners or viewers also relate to the content of the book, please leave a comment and let us know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, today we're going to be diving into chapter 6 of Making Nice with Naughty. And the chapter 6 is all about letting your values guide you. Letting your values guide you. And I have so many questions about this chapter. And those folks who have had an opportunity to read the chapter and are aware of it or just starting their journey, I would encourage you to go back and listen to previous episodes so you can kind of travel along this with us. But in the chapter where we're titled, Let Your Values Guide You, Tom, you talk about in those first couple of chapters, I wrote it down, so let me see how you wrote it. So you defined values really within the first few paragraphs of that chapter, and you define it as those qualities at the core of our being. And then you talk about the North Star.
Yes.
You give that analogy of the North Star. Do you mind expanding on that analogy?
Yeah. So when you're out on the water and you're not sure what direction to take, mariners for a long time used the constellations, the stars, to help guide them through this vast darkness of unknowing. And so when we have those anchors, such as the North Star, we can use that to move toward, knowing that we'll never actually reach the North Star. And in a similar vein, that's what our values are. Our values are those things that help us to navigate through the vastness of unknowing that is inherent with living. Life is an inherent mystery. And yet we want to have a sense of, am I moving in the right direction? And that's what our values helps us to do, is they help us to move in the right direction by setting our sights on what's important, so that even if we're finding ourselves going off course, we can get
Mm-hmm.
back on course by focusing on what's important.
That takes some time to even know what that is, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It takes some time. In essence, when we're trying to figure out who we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can, even if we dive, took a look into that, is that even that question, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Right? From a Buddhist perspective, that's not possible to know. Right? You'll never know who you are, because then if you did know who you are, then who is that that's doing the knowing? Right?
Oh my.
But you
Yes.
can you can know who you are not. In other words, you can know whether
Mm-hmm.
you are not living in accordance with your values.
And would you know that that's happening when you have that internal turmoil or
Uh,
regret, or
right,
you
right.
have
So
you second guess yourself maybe?
right. So let's look at that. Let's look at regret.
Mm-hmm.
I love regret. Regret is one of those emotions that is so. It's like you think you know what it is, but it's deceiving. So typically, when people experience regret, they experience it as a projection. See, regret is the illusion that you're only entitled to positive outcomes.
Wow. Wow.
So, is that true?
And in
Are
and entitlement too.
and
So
it,
that's another place.
yeah,
There's just that entitlement, and but to be entitled to only positive outcomes, which is really what we all want.
we all want a positive outcome, but if we uh, uh, fixate or grab onto that outcome and believe that I must have it that way, then you may end up violating your values, right?
Mm.
That pursuit of something, some outcome, you may end up doing things that are in violation of your integrity, and that's what in essence a violation of values tend to become, is a
Hmm.
violation of integrity.
So then the discontentment, the disruptive feeling
Yeah,
is is almost our internal, what is it, like, barometer that tells us this this doesn't feel good.
that's
There's a
right.
problem here. I can't continue doing this, or I will do this, but I will regret it,
That's right.
or I regret that I was made that decision.
Yeah, and sometimes people will turn that regret into resentment.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that resentment, like regret, is has that element of coyness to it, where
Hmm.
resentment is a projection of anger onto another person when uh, only when you have done something that violates your integrity, but then project the anger onto the other person. So you notice that you only feel resentful when you do something that you rather had not done, right? Or you wanted
Hmm.
to say yes to something that you said no to. It's
Hmm.
when we violate our values, when we don't live with integrity, we may feel resentful, but instead of
Hmm.
actually owning that, oh, it was me who violated my boundaries,
Hmm.
I project that anger onto the other person and make it about the other person. You did this to me,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that can be show up as a violation of a value, like kindness, for example. If someone has a value of kindness, they may end up showing up as unkind.
Mm. So thinking about discontent, I'm I know when we were talking about this offline, you had mentioned prolonged discontent.
Right, right.
Prolonged discontent meaning that I'm having this feeling of discontent for a period of time. How long is the period of time, Tom, that
Yeah, when I think of prolonged discontent, I think of discontent that is a few hours or more.
oh, wow. Okay.
Because life happens, life is hard, life is
Mm-hmm.
full of disappointments, but if we too rigidly get fixed around that disappointment, then we tend to not show up to life in adaptive ways, right? And so when we're discontented in a prolonged fashion, we are in essence we're acting in a maladaptive way. And so
Okay.
you know the people who experience prolonged discontent experience it because of one or both of the following are true:
Okay.
that they are focused on stuff that they have no control over. They're over focused on, they're just thinking about what someone else feels, what someone else thinks, what someone else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're not taking action on the things that they know is within their control.
Or
They're
maybe
not taking
both.
the action.
Could they do both?
That's right. So it's like I'm over focused on here. I know what I need to do, but I'm still not taking action on it. So it's that it can be absolutely both,
Mm.
uh, and and that's what fuels that prolonged discontent. But when you know your values, when
Mm-hmm.
you know your North Star,
Mm-hmm.
then that helps you to decide what is the action I need to take that will take me just that much closer to the things that are important to me.
When you were in the book in chapter 6, you go on and you expand on what values are and what they're not. And I think that is very helpful in all of us as we're trying to look at what are our values. And there's a lot of confusion around that word. You know, you talk about values are not goals,
Right.
right?
Right.
What how do you differentiate how does one differentiate between a value and a goal?
Values are immutable, right? They are
You'll never reach them.
you'll well, in that sense, that's right. So they're the things that are always going to be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like again, uh, uh, once you do the action, like for example, being kind. If
Right.
I give money to a family member who's in need of it because that's kind, I don't get to now check off kindness from my life and be like, okay, I don't need to worry about being kind anymore. I met that goal. So
But there is
be,
people who think like that.
yes, for sure.
I mean, that think, okay, I've got to demonstrate kindness. I'm going to do this one thing, and now I've demonstrated that I'm a kind person.
And notice me, notice me, notice me.
And notice me, notice me. So, in that respect, their kindness is like a to-do list,
Right,
not a guiding principle.
right, right. Yeah. And sometimes people, back to the idea of goals, sometimes people confuse goals with outcomes. Goals are things that you have total control over achieving, right? So maybe I want to sell 40,000 copies of Making Nice with Naughty, right? That would not be a goal because I don't have total control over that. That is an outcome. And when you can tease those apart, then your values help to focus your attention on the things that you have total control over and loosely hold your preference of a particular outcome, knowing that despite your best efforts, you still may not get the outcome. Despite your best efforts, you still may
Mm,
not get to your destination, even though you're following the North Star, because you can't know whether a storm's going to come in and you might have to navigate around that or temporarily suspend the destination so that you can accommodate the realities of life. I mean, that is there. But if you get so uptight about, oh, I got to get to that destination, independent of
mm-hmm.
what's going on around me, You're going
Right.
to experience a lot of discontent because you're not focused on what you have control over.
I love that you said that goals are something I have total control over, because that's so liberating. When you think about your example about selling so many books, maybe you say my goal is to invest X number of dollars in advertising, or doing something that you're hopeful that the outcome is the increased sales, but not necessarily, you're not out there, you're not making the sale, you're not buying these books, or in a, you're not a vendor at a conference or selling the books, right?
Right.
It seems to me like it's very liberating, where you don't have the same pressure on you, because it's something that, what you just said, that their goals are something that I have total control over.
Yeah. So, for example, when we talk about making nice with naughty,
Mm-hmm.
a value may be to have pleasure-based sex
Mm-hmm.
versus performance-based sex. So when you have a pleasure-based sex as a value, then you're going to be thinking about, what can I do to make my experience with my lover or with myself all the more enjoyable, right? But if it's a performance-based or outcome based,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to be thinking, I need to have an orgasm, right? I need to have an
Right.
orgasm. Having an orgasm is the symbol or the sign of a good time. And if it doesn't happen, then it's a terrible time. Well, the reality is we don't uh, have direct control over whether we have an orgasm. And that there are other factors that can impede the ability to have an orgasm, such as becoming anxious and stressed that you're not going to have an
Right.
orgasm.
Right.
But with that pleasure-based view, you can focus on what you do have control over, and finding ways to increase the pleasure that you're having out of the experience that you're sharing with someone else.
I tell you, I think that is so profound, and really so much. When I have, for myself, it's always been pleasure based. I didn't even think about performance for myself, and and just you saying that is kind of eye opening to me. But it goes right in with the over controlled person. It goes right in with the over controlled person, that I have to do this, and it has to be this way, it has to do, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
I tell you, those folks that are listening and maybe watching this, I really hope that you're able to do some self reflection. And if you are one of those folks out there that is not pleasure based, you are having a really difficult time, and just the insightfulness that you bring to your reader and now to the listener is so helpful, Tom.
Hello there,
So,
dear
so
readers.
helpful.
I'm absolutely thrilled to announce the release of the Making Nice with Nadia audiobook, narrated by yours truly. As the author, I've poured my heart and soul in telling your story, especially how your psychological temperament shows up in the bedroom and how it gets in the way of intimacy. With every sentence, every emotion, I'm right there with you, guiding you through getting more meaning and fulfillment in your sexual and intimate relationships. The wait is over. You can now download the audiobook on Audible or from my website, drtommurray.com, and immerse yourself in where you reclaim the playfulness of your sexuality. My voice is your compass as you navigate through every titillating moment, gaining powerful insights from psychology. Claim your aha moment. Click on the link and join me on this unforgettable journey toward making nice with Naughty. Making Nice with Nadia audiobook, available on Audible. Download now.
Yeah, but the pleasure based. I mean, that's just how I hadn't really thought about performance based. But
Yeah, but you
that's
can
just
see,
me.
yeah,
I
you
can
can
see.
that how it
Mm-hmm.
can be, how the people who have sexual problems, so much of it is in that, what we talked about in an earlier
Mm-hmm.
episode, those forms of sexual perfectionism. I
Right.
have to be sexually perfect. My partner has to be sexually
Mm-hmm.
perfect. I think my
Mm.
partner thinks I have to be sexually perfect, and society expects me to be sexually perfect. Well, uh, uh, that's very I'm sorry, that's very outcome oriented,
It sure is.
right?
It sure
And
is.
there's just, and it's uh, uh, one of the things about values is that they're supposed to inspire you.
Mm-hmm.
I would be hard pressed for anybody to say that thinking I have to be sexually perfect, or my partner has to be sexually perfect, society expects me to be sexually
Mm.
perfect. I would be hard pressed to think anybody think that's inspiring.
No, no, no. How does how does one acquire values?
The great question. Values are influenced certainly by messages that we gathered from our parents, from our schools, our community, uh, media, etc. What is what is special about values, though, is that even if other people influence them, ultimately they have to be freely chosen. They have to be things that, again, inspire you, that really speak to who you want to be, what your ideal self is, right? Um, Versus, some people who they have their mind chatter may be filled with statements of "I must," "I should," "I have to," right?
Mm.
And people may think, "Oh, that must be my values." I must, I should, I have to, which is that kind of proverbial finger pointing down at you, right? I must,
Mm-hmm.
I should, I have to. Versus, I get to, I want to, I choose to, right? Even just hearing that, there's an energetic quality that's so different, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
much more lifting, much more inspiring.
Empowering, right? Well, with your if you've chosen your values and you think things are going fine and you've maybe made some declaration that these are my values, how how does one respond, or how do you have confirmation that those indeed are your values when someone comes out of nowhere and says, I really question your values?
Mm, mm, mm. Well, certainly people can have different values,
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, and different domains of our lives may prioritize different sets of values.
Okay.
So values aren't going to be constant in all areas of your life, um,
Like
but they may re.
when you're a parent versus when you're at the office versus when you're at the grocery store or when you're driving down the interstate.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So when you're driving down the interstate, for example, in that moment, you may want to be a good citizen and follow traffic laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
But being a good citizen may not necessarily be a priority when you're at home making dinner and teaching your kids how to cook, right? It's just
Right.
like, but it's not to say that being a good citizen is no longer important. It's just that in that different domain, in that different context, other values kind of rise to the top.
When you hear that from somebody though, that's making comments about your personal values, how does somebody really know what your personal values are?
Right.
I
Right.
mean, really,
Yeah.
especially if you have the different context. How does someone? I mean, you have certainly we leave footprints of how we've behaved and the outcomes and things that we see, but to really, there may be people who I'm sure there's folks who value kindness, as you've talked about, yet drive right past somebody on the street who may be looking for a handout. Right? Doesn't mean that they're not kind.
Right.
You know, I think
Yeah.
I think that is almost just a really nearsighted statement when you say that to someone, because you don't really have an awareness of what's going on in someone's head.
That's right. That's right. In fact, there's a cognitive bias called the fundamental attribution error, right? Which is essentially assigning uh, uh, usually negative attributes to someone's personality. Um, so thinking that, oh, you just drove by that person, that panhandler, you just drove by them, you must be an unkind person.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that would be an example of the
Mm-hmm.
fundamental attribution error, where that person who's driving past them might be thinking, I'm already 10 minutes late picking up my kids at the daycare.
Right. Right.
Right. And
Right.
that's the why, and particularly in marriage or in intimate relationships, it can be so powerfully helpful to imagine what must the context be for my partner that makes their behavior make sense. Right.
Mm-hmm.
If you genuinely believe your partner is a good person, even if they do things that seem out of character,
Right.
it can be helpful to ask yourself, well, what must the context be that makes sense? So, for example, if my partner is late, right, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I could think, oh, they're just inconsiderate, right? That would be a fundamental attribution error. Or I could think I know that there's someone who gets so hyper focused on what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
that it's much more likely that they just looked up at the clock and realized, oh crap, I'm already 10 minutes
Mm-hmm.
late.
Right. Right. Big and when you do that, it it relieves your discontent. You know,
Right.
it really tapers that
Compassion,
down. Mm-hmm.
compassion is a wonderful way to release the pressure valve on
Mm-hmm.
discontent.
You talk about also, as we're going through values, kind of some characteristics, that values are not wants or needs. Can you expand on that?
So, before we do that, can I go to the
Mm-hmm.
values are not emotions?
Oh, sure, sure. Mm-hmm.
Because I think often clients will say, well, one of my values is I just want to be happy, right?
Mm, I hear
And
that a lot.
sure,
God just wants me to be happy. I mean,
yeah,
that's what I hear a lot.
hmm,
Or whatever the authority in the life is,
right.
they
Or
just,
the
or I just want my kids to be
that's
happy.
that's what I was just going to say. Yeah, that's a common. I just want my kids to be happy. And if we go back to what we talked about earlier, well, do I have uh, uh, do I have direct control over it? Well, emotions are by nature temporary. They're meant to be fleeting. They're meant to be a reflection of your relationship with your environment. In other words, they're feedback. They're helping you to get feedback about whether something is to be approached or to be recoiled from. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the nature of feelings. They're meant to be temporary, where values are much more permanent, right? That they really speak to the core of who you are, what's important to you, what's meaningful to you. And so when we are able to separate this idea that being happy is a value, we no longer pursue it in that way that it is it's not a goal, right? Because we can't control how we feel, despite what a lot of popular psychology tells us, that you can choose to feel happy, that just doesn't fit with what we know about cognitive science, right? We don't
Mm-hmm.
choose our feelings, but what we do choose is whether to cultivate a context where a particular feeling is more likely, such as happy, or
Mm-hmm.
cultivating a context where the likelihood for desire is more likely,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Right.
sometimes we think, well, I want my partner to be horny all the time because I want to be able to have sex all the time.
Until you don't.
Yeah, I had a client the other day. I could have sex. I could have sex every day, and I said, I only find people who say that they want to have sex every day comes from those people who don't have sex every day. That it's the feeling like, oh, I'm being deprived of something, and then when you think you're being deprived of it, you're just so ravenous for it that you think you want to eat it every day.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Oh, bless their heart, as they say in the South.
Bless their heart.
So values are not wants or needs. We mentioned that just a moment ago, and often the example I give in the book is they say
Mm-hmm.
things like, "I need my partner to never lie to me." Well, what
Mm.
that requires is other people's participation.
Which you
So
have no
the
control over.
That's right. And that you have no control over. So it's like I can have the value of honesty where I can choose to show up in ways that are honest, right? But to
Mm-hmm.
have this, I need you to trust me. I need you to love me. I need you to desire me. All of those kinds of things. Those aren't values because they require someone else's um, participation, and values have to be freely chosen. So if it's not their particular wish to show up in those ways, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm demanding that they show up in those ways, then that's clearly not their values. That particular value isn't being freely chosen by them.
I'll tell you, seeing those relationships and being witnessing to those relationships as I've had folks come to the clinic and just outside of my normal musing of life, those relationships are exhausting. They're exhausting.
Mm.
The one person is constantly seeking and reminding and wanting to make alterations so that those desires are present, and then the other person is fearful to make a move without making sure that it's that it's making them feel better. It's just an exhausting relationship that doesn't end well. It really doesn't end well. Somebody usually gets very sick emotionally. They start showing some medical problems with their anxieties due to fear of upsetting the other because they're not performing or doing something that they're expecting to do. Or they say, I need you to be more receptive, right? Or I
Mm.
need you to listen to me, you know. But then, but then really, I think it just really reminds us that we don't have control over what other people are thinking or doing. We
Mm.
don't.
Yeah.
Even as much as we may think that we do. That in itself is such a fallacy. How
For
many
sure.
times have we heard, I know what they're thinking? They don't think I know what they're thinking, but I know what they're thinking.
All the time. All the time.
All the
The
time.
another example is I need them to respect me.
Oh, yes, that's a very, very big one. I need to
Right.
be heard.
I need to be heard. I need to be respected. And typically, just like we talked about resentment and regret,
Mhm.
I need to be respected is usually um, code for I need compliance.
I was going to say, I need you to obey me.
That's right. Yeah. And yet people don't just say, just do what I want. right? But this idea of I need respect, and of course it's it, that that may require that the other person violate their boundaries or violate their values
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
order to be obedient.
I think that's so clear too, especially, you had mentioned just a few minutes ago about being in the South, and I grew up in the South, and then I've also lived as an adult in the South, and it's not uncommon for Southern parents, uh, primary school instructors to talk about respect. I
Mm,
need you need my children respect me. But what they really are saying is my children obey me, my children are compliant. And
yes.
that word respect gets defined incorrectly when it comes to the outside of that arena. Like if a person respect is more than respect is not obeying, right? Respect is I hear you, I hear what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, and this is what I'm going to do with that information.
Mm,
To me,
mm,
that's respect
mm,
rather than not. It's recognizing others around you. To me,
mm,
and when we use the meaning or have it as a code for compliance, then it becomes it respect becomes more authoritative
mm,
and becomes more of a power dynamic than a mutual trust between people. Does that make sense?
oh, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think about uh, respect as honoring the autonomy of the other.
You always come up with it so nicely, Tom. You say such nice things. You have obviously done this. But it's really you're right. You're right. I mean, you're obviously a very learned person, but to you're right. That says it beautifully.
Yeah, and 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 when we expect obedience,
Mhm.
we can't have that can't be respectful.
Right.
You know, and over controlled people, I would say, are particularly they it can be easy to pursue obedience, because if people would just do what I want them to do, then life would be much more predictable.
It's a better place in the world, is what they think.
Yeah. And
But predictability.
I would say that a lot of over controlled people um, are also highly conscientious. You know, they uh, are genuinely uh, good and caring people, and have thought a lot about life and how to solve problems and whatnot. And so they actually may have excellent advice to give.
Mhm.
And it can be confusing to some over controlled people of why others are so reluctant to take their advice.
Oh my goodness. Some of us will remain nameless. Oh.
In fact, it's no surprise to the listeners that I identify as over controlled. And so even within my own relationships, I had intentionally made this shift to never giving unsolicited advice to my partner,
Hmm.
right? Because for a lot of people on the receiving end, unsolicited advice feels like criticism,
Mhm.
right? And there's this little voice in me that wants to say, well, you might want to consider.
I
you know,
suggest.
I suggest, but instead I filter that in my head because
Mm-hmm.
kindness, consideration, respect are important values that I have, and I want to show up in a way that is honoring those values. And so I have to be thinking, I have to pull back from my impulse
Mm-hmm.
so that I can live out those values.
That's great advice to our listeners. Well, the next, keeping going on this list of what values are and are not. Values are not conditional, is the next that you discuss.
Yeah.
To me, that's if and when this
Right.
can happen. If this and this and this happens, then that's okay for that. Is that what that's referring to?
That's exactly right. So it's like uh, uh, they're not conditional in the sense that you're willing to give up on those values. They may be, like we mentioned earlier, they may show up differently in different situations. Some may be more important when you're driving versus when you're at home
Sure.
cooking a meal with your family, but they're still important. Um, and so you're not going to give them up just because they're inconvenient. In fact, you may it may signify to you that your values are important because they are inconvenient, right? And so, in other words,
Mm-hmm.
um, sometimes uh, uh, we have pain around certain values because the pain that we have is pointing to how meaningful something is to us. And people will say, for example, I just don't want to feel this pain anymore, right?
Mm.
And uh, and what I'll do, I'll have them take a piece of paper, and on one side of the piece of paper, I'll have them write pain. And on the other side, I will have them write the word caring. So one side pain, one
Mm-hmm.
side caring. Caring being a value, right? And then I'll have them crumble that paper up and I'll say, throw it in the trash. Now that you've gotten rid of pain, what must you also do with caring?
You have to give it away too.
You have to throw it away too. And do you want to be someone who doesn't care?
That's very good. That's very good. And if you say yes, that's a problem. We have something that can help you with that.
You have a prescription pad, right?
I have a prescription pad.
Yeah. And
Take
so
your caring pill.
those are the uh, it's because we care that we have
Mm-hmm.
pain around something. Right? It's because
I
we
think
care.
that is really hits so close to home when we're feeling sad or painful because of something that's happened. It's because we care.
Mm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Your next, you talk about that values are not deficits.
Yeah. So this one is a reminder that values aren't to be used as a sign of weakness. I'm too caring as a person.
Oh, how many times have I heard that? I'm too caring. I've heard people say that.
Yeah. And remember, values are to be inspiring, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so they're not meant to be, something that you feel like you is a measure of your worth, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
if you somehow aren't showing up in a certain way, that's a reflection of your worth. But it's really again, values are inspiring. Who do I want to be? How do I um, pursue these things so that I can live in accordance with who I want to be?
Mm-hmm. I think about, I've heard folks say, I'm too honest.
Yes.
And then usually that's usually coupled with a statement that can be very, very hateful,
Right. Yeah.
almost like it's their permission.
Yes.
I'm
I
very honest. I'm too honest. And I'm just going to tell you, Tom, you don't have a hair on your head.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting you bring this up, because some people will say, I have a values conflict. I'm too honest, but I also want to be kind, for example. And there's a values conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Well, values conflicts are exceedingly rare. They're exceedingly rare. So because they are exceedingly rare, there's likely another explanation for someone to think they're having a values conflict. And that other explanation, or those explanations, are: one, it's either a rules conflict or a time conflict. So in the example of I'm too honest, but I want to be kind, there's
Mm-hmm.
a rules conflict that is there, which is, if I feel strongly about something, I have to say it. So I have a rule that if I think this, I have to say it, and everyone else has to want to hear it.
Oh my.
Right?
Oh my. Oh my.
And of course that's a rule
Mm-hmm.
that can be, and we, what do we know about over control people? They love their rules, so they can convince themselves that
Mm-hmm.
something is absolute and go there. The other is the time conflict. So some people will say, I have a conflict between being career oriented and family oriented, and they think that that's a values conflict. When it's actually a time conflict. In other words, if you had all the time in the world, would you give to each equally? And most people would agree that they would. So it's not a values conflict. That one is particularly a time conflict. It's just that we only have a certain amount of time, and so we have to
Mm-hmm.
make decisions about things.
Yeah, that's very interesting. When someone is looking at their, kind of stepping back and looking at what they would say their values are, how does that even get defined? How does somebody even, other than hearing the word value, understanding what the different values are, do you have any suggestions for folks that are maybe they're coming in that place in their life, maybe they're a young adult or teenager or somebody that's listening, and they're just starting their life, or perhaps they have had some sort of a spiritual awakening and they want to change something. How do you can't necessarily select your values, or maybe you can. What would a good set of values look like? Can you give us some suggestions of values?
Yes. So how do you select them? Going with that first. In the book, I give a couple of exercises around values clarification
Mm-hmm.
that readers can review, and there are also what's called values card sort exercises. And so if someone Googles values card sort exercise, then there are both interactive ones online, or they can download a packet of values cards that they then organize, usually in several columns of what's important, what's not important, and then you kind of continuously massage it down to your core. What are the core values that you have? What are the things that are really important to you? And that helps to give you a sense of the values that are going to be guiding, that are going to be your North Star. Kind of more uniquely to Making Nice with Naughty, you might ask yourself questions like, what kind of partner do I want to be? Do I want to be a present partner, an invested partner? Do I want to exude acceptance or curiosity? Who do I want to be in my relationship? And that kind of clues you into what's important. You might ask, what is vital for me to having a satisfying, meaningful, and fulfilling sexual relationship? Right? What's important? Do I want to hold on to this view of sex as performative, or do I want to pursue a sexual relationship that's pleasure based? Yeah. So that would be somewhat of a beginning, but there are other examples and exercises in the book that I encourage people to take a look at.
Yeah, I'll tell you, as I was reading and came across those questions, I I don't know if it's in the works or if it's available, but there should be a journal. You should have we should have a journal. You should have a journal, Tom, with this information already pre-prompted in there for folks like me or others who need to just really reflect and think about things. I don't, because you use the journal is something that comes up frequently in this book.
Yes, yes. Well, if the listeners let us know if you would love to have that journal.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. Well, in the end of the chapter, you do give us several questions to think about. When you do the journaling, just a little segue on journaling, how much time should one devote to journaling? How much time, like to go through these questions, what would you say is adequate or time, reflective time to really be able to answer those questions?
One of the techniques is to have these journal prompts where you read it
Mm-hmm.
and let it percolate in the unconscious mind for a period of time. Maybe you read it and then go out on a walk. And then you come back and then you put pen to paper and you start filling it out, preferably in pencil, right? Because then you can, again, go about your day, have a restful night's sleep, and then you return to it, and you might be inspired to make some changes that are made possible because you've taken some time to let the things percolate. It's best that this is not an exercise that is just done kind of hastily, but to realize that values clarification is a lifelong personal pursuit, that it isn't certainly one and done,
Mm-hmm.
and taking one's time, I think, can be really fruitful.
I think that's great advice, and just the fact that it's not a one and done, that there's a opportunity for reflection, for correction, for addition, editing, for all those different things, and there's no right or wrong. There's no spell check. There's nobody that's going to come back around and read it and make some adjustments. And it's a document. It's a way for you to put down your thoughts on paper. I would also recommend, and I would say that the research supports this, is writing it down using some sort of tactical rather than in the typewriter. Now, if you're in a place where for whatever reason, you're unable to write physically with a pen or pencil on paper, then certainly using your keyboard and typing that out is better than not doing it at all. But be able to touch the paper and touch your pencil and transfer that information through the act of writing. There's something very voodoo-y about that.
Love
Very
that.
magical.
Yes, I love that. Um, Francis, if we can, if I can conclude by just um, inviting the listeners and readers to think about adding one particular value to their list, and that is valuing rebelliousness. You know,
Oh.
a lot of making nice with naughty folks are conformists in many ways. They're rule following, organized, perfectionist, practical, and color within the line types. Right? They're
Mhm.
that's what has helped them be successful. But pursuing rebelliousness can be incredibly uh, uh, powerful relative to making nice with naughty, because rebelliousness is going against a lot of those old worn out sexual scripts that one has acquired in childhood, from parents, from schools,
Mhm.
from religious communities. And so, you know, shaking it up a little bit, really asking yourself, whose life am I actually living? Am I living the life that other people told me was what I needed to live in order to be successful,
Mhm.
right? Or what would it be like if I become just a bit rebellious against that, so that I can define for myself what is a meaningful, fulfilling sexual relationship, that I can define for myself those values that will help me navigate through a life that is worth sharing with someone else.
I agree, Tom. I think that would be amazing. And if folks would take out the time to do that, that would that would just be one more barrier removed to having that life making nice with naughty.
Always a pleasure being with you, Francis.
Thank you, Tom. This has been so enlightening to me, and I really appreciate you just breaking things down and spending the time just kind of bringing it down to Francis level so I can understand some of these things. And then I'm going to look up the value card sort exercise. I think that would be very interesting to see the different values out there and start looking at just what resonates. Yeah, that's interesting. It's
And if
interesting.
our readers want to share with us what are the values that they've identified, we can provide links to different value sort or indicators, value sorts indicators within the show notes.
Perfect. Perfect. As always, Tom, it's a pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. And thank you so much for spending this time with me today.
Bye now.
Bye.
And that wraps up another episode of Making Nice with Naughty. We hope you enjoyed our exploration of intimacy for the rule-following and organized.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found our discussions helpful or intriguing, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.
Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps others discover the podcast. Plus, it lets us know what topics you'd like us to cover in the future episodes.
Have questions or you want to share your experiences? Connect with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Links on the description.
And for more in-depth insights, be sure to grab a copy of my book, Making Nice with Naughty, available on Amazon and Audible for the audiobook.
Thank you again for spending time with us. Remember, you can be both organized and adventurous in matters of the heart.
Until next time, keep making nice with naughty. To renew your passion
and ignite your